Hey, everybody, welcome back to Contest Prep University. I'm Joe Klemczewski with Adam Atkinson. We are in the middle of a small series, calling it a bit of a series, where we're looking at contest day strategies, starting with carb management, which of course bleeds through the entire peak week experience, then hydration for contest day. Then we kicked over, of course, to minerals, the biggest being sodium, its relationship with potassium. But I think if we look at those as all of the big rocks that you put in the jar first, there still can be contest day nuances that need to be discussed on their own merit. Specifically, one thing that comes to my mind, Adam, is the difference in body types. If you go kind of the phenotypic spectrum all the way from serious ectomorph to endomorph. Classically, of course, we now don't describe those things as just three iterations on a continuum, but more of a literal spectrum. There is a difference. Like you have an ectomorph, and they never spill over. They never look softer. They never look filmier. It's just a matter of they're either full or flat. And so to me, that says a lot of this is a metabolic effect. But then there are some people who, hour to hour, meal to meal, they look drastically different. So I know we have to touch on those three elements, sodium as well as other minerals, hydration, and carbohydrates. But just on a contest day perspective alone, I really want to touch on some of the things that can cause your physique to look drastically different, what we're looking for when we monitor that, and then how we rectify it as we go. So I'm going to throw this one right to you off the bat. I don't want to take all the easy ones, but I want you to kind of, Adam, go through a list of things that you notice with clients that are sometimes surprising, and then how you assess what you need to do to get back on track.
Yeah, so a few things that can swing the physique on show day. Obviously, sodium, water, potassium, those are going to be the big ones. But I think we're talking about more smaller or other nuances. Certainly, meals will have a big effect. So, how much you're eating, what are the size of the meals, or even how long ago you ate. Another thing is stress management. So, this is what I think one of the biggest factors we battle in peak week scenarios. It's just not a typical day. Wake up time, someone may wake up 5 hours earlier for a makeup appointment, and that's something you maybe don't trend and see. Additionally, I think one of the other big things that I see is temperature. Is the venue super cold? That can definitely make a big difference. Also, the last one I'll touch on that I think is maybe one of the most important nuances here, and I've kind of created a strategy to help my clients with this, is activity. Are we being overactive? Are we standing backstage for too long? You're standing up when open men's bodybuilding's on, and you're the last class at women's bikini. That's a whole lot of classes to just stand backstage through. And I think that can make a big difference. Or over relaxing, sending pickup pictures when you just got up off the floor, maybe a cold floor, and they look flat because they've just been hibernating and not moving.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean that would be about the extent of my list, with maybe the addition of we have talked in the past that maybe it's a thing, maybe it's not, but tanning product can sometimes create this real, just mild edematous look to somebody's skin that it just belies logic to me, but it seems to be rather consistent. And I can't figure out necessarily if it is that or not. I mean, it's just something you can't really empirically, study. But another is I feel like some people, maybe they're used to taking a handful of supplements every day, and then they leave for this contest, and for 2 days, those aren't in the mix. Some people may be taking medications at different times, even something, they have a headache and they're taking Tylenol and they don't. All of those little things could have some variance, but sticking to our theme of the big rocks in the jar first, I think you're exactly right to talk about the meals. I'll give you an example of a client of mine who's relatively new, and it's something I see a lot of, but it still surprises me that wow, I kind of failed as a coach to not prepare this person. Um, we tend, as just human nature, to think that action is better. Like, what should I be doing? Should I be doing something? And so, as a coach, when I start getting messages from a client, like, what should I do now? What should I do now? Should I eat yet? Should I eat yet? Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I change this? Should I change that? I'm like, dude, just calm the fuck down. Like, we got a schedule, we got a game plan. You're definitely leading into what you mentioned, Adam, as the second major issue, which can be stress and cortisol. But so many people push for fullness on contest day. Like, when you get on stage, if you're a bikini competitor, you want your delts to be as big as possible, you want your glutes to be full. Guys, bodybuilding, classic physique, etc. Like, everybody wants that huge pump and vascularity. And so we tend to err on the side of eat, 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 eat. And that can really induce huge amounts of spillover. So to get competitors to realize, no, you really want to feel empty and you want to be a little bit flat, just like a normal day. So your body needs those carbs, and now it's a timing effect for the stage. Uh, that's just something I see people make a mistake doing, and they can even sometimes talk their coach into it. If you tell your coach you perceive yourself as flat, and your coach says, okay, eat more of this, do more of this. So like, now you could be sabotaging yourself. So in that realm, maybe just, different divisions and so forth. Do you typically just really already have calculated exactly what you want for meals and macronutrients and timing, and that's just what you're going to do? Or are you also fine tuning that quite a bit?
There's definitely some fine tuning because the show schedule can always change. Um, there can be intermissions. I had one show where the lights kept going out. The lights kept tripping the breaker at the auditorium. And that was definitely a challenge because my client was getting hungry and I didn't want their physique to change. So that kind of put me in a predicament where, they kept asking and I was like, let's just hold a little bit longer if you can. And like to your point, if someone says they feel flat, you want to look into it. But typically, like food's not the answer. It's usually a sodium, water, mineral imbalance that we need to work on, or even just the movement. So I always say, with my clients, I want you to think of your show day as a caddy. So we have all the golf clubs in the bag. Um, the hope is that it's three shots to the green on a par four, but we may have to dig out of the sand trap. We may have to get an extra meal in. We may end up eating less if your makeup appointment runs late. You didn't have time for meal two, and you're pretty close to your class being lined up. I really don't want someone to eat, let's say if we have chicken and some kind of potato or something, rice on their meal, coming from their show day foods. I may not want them to have a larger meal like that right before stage. We'll just go right into their pump up. So, I usually send them Friday night the tentative plan on food times and check-ins, but it's always subject to change based on what can happen throughout a show day.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. I encountered this in the last couple of weeks as well, where a client just, really wanted that pre-pump up meal, and we had to go through the timing. I'm like, you just ate a pretty good sized normal meal, which had the sodium content we need about 90 minutes ago. Well, you sure I don't need this or this or this? Like, no, you don't. Like, it's only going to potentially spill you over. And for this particular client, we had a difficult time in a previous contest holding tightness. And as I mentioned, I think it's because I just was being, talked into, so to speak, like he just needed more food. Like, no, we are not going to eat more food. We're going to rely on water and just, the minerals. And he really did just stay super, super tight all day and pulled out of it, with fullness. I also had a different female and male who similarly, really high level pros, pro titles, natural Mr. Olympia, that kind of stuff. And she's also a pro. Um, where I'm like, I know we're going really conservative on food. I feel like, with a nod back to our session on carbohydrate management for contest day, we have enough glycogen. We just do. And so here are the meals we had planned today. Let's stick to that. Let's monitor photos and so forth. But we're going to use water more than we are carbs on contest day. And both of them, you make this call, and like any other coach in a performance sport, it's like you're gonna live with the results. Wasn't until they're off of a stage and we have stage photos, and I could not believe how full they were, just monstrously full in all the right ways, and yet maintained all of their tightness. Even got tighter, which is what should happen, right? But if you're starting to spill over even just acutely a little bit, sometimes you don't see that. You're inducing that your own level of softness that was not necessary. But one of the things that you mentioned that I really want to hit on hard is the cortisol stress, but also combined with physical stress of either standing around backstage on cement, for hours, or maybe you're lying down too much. You mentioned the temperature, which is definitely big, because if you're used to a certain amount of just subcutaneous, sweating, perspiration into the atmosphere, and that's not there, that's a factor. How often do you see these really complicate how tight somebody is?
think uh, I think sometimes that depends on the leanness required in the division. So even though bikini girls are pretty lean now, I would say where this kind of affected me, maybe even this weekend, and I knew we would be up against it, but maybe my masters competitors who they're doing figure and they're just going to have some generalized swelling in the legs. In those certain age categories, the lymphatic drainage into the tissues is just a little bit greater than maybe somebody younger. So my client, every time she sent her pictures this weekend, in the morning, her legs were just unbelievable. It's exactly how I wanted her on stage. And no matter how low we kept the meals, it was just the act of being awake and out of bed. Had I been able to have an alarm go off and her class go up, that would have been the perfect scenario. But there's just no way for that to happen. So we had her lay down as much as possible. Her show pics looked tighter than her general, midday photos. So that was great. But I just knew we would lose tightness based on the cadence of the show day, no matter what we fed her, because it was more a lymphatic system that we're battling versus, sodium and water and food.
Mhm. One of the ways I have been able to help that, but it's tough with managing your time at an event like this, if you can't really stay in tune with the expedition of the show, is you've even mentioned this in the past. You look a little filmy, a little spilled over. Maybe you think it's because you just need to get rid of a little glycogen and move around some water. So you go on a walk. You don't necessarily work up a sweat, but you're moving. Then with that metabolic activity, you're using some glycogen, you're going to release some water. You'll probably have to use the restroom and urinate. That's going to happen as it's in your vascular system now. But then go lay down, get your legs back up. So now your body temperature's up a little bit. You're probably superficially perspiring a little. And now assist, because it does come down to physics, getting some of that vascular fluid back into the venous system through the lymph system, as you said. And it can work. Like, it really can. It may be an hour-long process by the time you're drinking some water, you're walking, you're laying down, you're doing this. But if you really do feel like you're filmy and you shouldn't be, that's part of it, is metabolic activity, body temperature. But I would also say probably not the time to withhold water, because it's not that you're filmy because you're, quote, drinking too much water. It's the water's in the wrong place interstitially, and you're just not releasing it. So the walk and the warming up will help that, but you still want water in your body going into muscle cells, and the activity you just performed helps drive that influence toward the muscle tissue. So again, a lot of moving parts there, but if you think through what's happening from digestion to the metabolic activity of conversion to glycogen and vice versa, you can really kind of sort that out and get tighter fairly quickly.
Absolutely.
So with your clients, I'm interested because this is a thing. I mean, as you're describing for a female, maybe masters, maybe not, but you start losing that tightness in the lower body. Is there anything else you do besides what I just described?
I've been having a lot of my athletes do what we call a test pump up. So typically they'll have their bands nearby and they'll send a set of photos pre pump and post pump. And I've really been liking doing that. That's literally, I would say, if I were to have a protocol, that's like standard procedure for everybody now. And I really like seeing the difference between a flat, well, I shouldn't say flat, but a cold set where they just take off their warm ups and do a set of photos, and then seeing them immediately after they pump up for maybe 5 to 7 minutes. Let me know how the pump felt. Sometimes they don't know. They're just like, I don't know how to feel. I don't know what a good pump feels like. I'm always kind of surprised when people say that, but I think they're so worried they're going to derail my decision making based on what they tell me. Um, so it just kind of comes with the experience of athletes, but I've really been liking doing that. And, obviously with the movement, we see a little bit more tightness, a little bit more fullness in a perfect scenario. If not, we know something's wrong. So that's where we need to make changes. And it's better to do it then than be backstage pumping up. I can't get a pump. It's, you have then till the MC calls you on stage. And I like having a little bit more time to control these variables prior.
And just on a technical aspect, I imagine with a 5 to 7 minute pump up, it's, some lateral, some arm works, maybe a set of push-ups, rows, towel rolls, that kind of thing. Let's assume everything looks great. Like, wow, you really you're filling up, you look tighter now. That activity, let's say you generated the use of 50 to 100 calories. Do you then have to say, okay, well, now this is what we ate an hour ago and we still have this much time. So now that we did that little quote test pump, we should probably have a little bit more food or water? Or like, how do you manage that decision based on what you
Yeah,
see?
it depends on really timing and how far out they are. So usually if they're within the hour or two, we'll let them sit and because usually they'll consume an actual pump up meal for, their pump up. So we know something's incoming eventually. I will also say that pump up is usually close to their second meal of the day. So they're pumping kind of through that meal to a degree.
Mhm. People probably get tired of me talking about these next two things I'm going to mention, but I also, if tanning considerations are not an issue, I also find people have a hard time staying tight on contest day. If they can get up in the morning and have a pretty decent workout, like I've had people do a full 30 minutes of cardio or a pretty, decent workout, because then we have that glycogen turnover I was talking about. You're using it, then what we consume for the first meal is going to right away be heading into muscle tissue. That synthesis, it's at least going to start from glucose to glycogen. So we at least have water following solutes in that direction. But then just the fact that your body temperature is that much warmer for a couple hours, that can do a lot. I've seen it so objectively keeping people tighter who have really had that problem. But again, it's so tough with contest timing. It's so tough with tanning products that it's not as easy as it used to be when people were just putting on Dream Tan, backstage, and that was their entire tanning procedure.
Yeah, those were kind of the days, right? You would see your client exactly like you'd saw them all week until they put their tan on, not the night before. Yeah, tanning is certainly, you put a tan on and then you immediately see your client at the hotel room lighting and then you see them at venue lighting. And that can be very different to the process as well, just from a coach's eye perspective. And me and my clients kind of laughed this weekend because we were in Chattanooga and everyone had their clients standing in front of the windows. Well, it was overcast, so those windows didn't really help all that much. And I always have my spotlight, but my spotlight did not do much help there. So I actually moved my clients backstage. They had a really wonderful backstage light that was almost too bright. And I started having my clients check in there, and we kind of chuckled because they were watching me do their check-ins. And when I brought them backstage, we were laughing because I was like, "Look, everyone's doing their check-ins out there, and you saw her, you couldn't see stuff, right?" And she's like, "Yeah." I was like, "We're in here where you can actually see." And they were kind of laughing. I was like, lighting's really important on what you see and how you manage your clients.
Mhm. The last thing I'll say to wrap this up is, as you were discussing just client check-ins and how making sure that you know how they look at different times of the day. Another thing that can help reduce cortisol as well is just having a very solid trust perspective in that as a client, I know when my meals are supposed to be. I know how much is in them from a macronutrient standpoint to minerals and so forth. And so I don't really need to look at myself every 5 minutes. I'm gonna have some fluctuations. I'm gonna look a little softer, a little tighter here and there. So don't overly obsess. You don't want to obviously just stay blind to it, but I just think that that can add a lot of extra stress to the situation if you're not careful. And that other drum I'm going to keep beating is the fact that if you are over carbing, hydration's not going to do much to help or hurt you. Like you're just going to be softer and spilled over. If you are underhydrated, then vice versa, carbs are not going to necessarily help or hurt you because you're still going to be just flat. The muscle tissue is not going to be full. So that's why I say, stay a little bit on that flat side. You want to be tight, tight, tight. And then the strategic implementation of water backstage while you're pumping up is just, it's no different than you having a great workout. I know, Adam, if you were to go work chest or back or arms today and you start hydrating, like, you need that for the mechanical production of force. And so you start slamming water, like, well, I'm going to be in the gym training in 20 minutes. Let me drink some water. You got your water bottle in the gym. And when you get that unbelievable, pump and vascularity, that's from the water. Like you don't get that from any amount of carbs or sodium if the water is not there. So that's why is I've even overemphasized it more than ever in my career. I'm seeing better results from clients of both sexes, all divisions, and getting as full as possible. And we're just not compromising tightness at all. I really think that's the key.
Yeah, I agree. I think that sometimes people worry that their stomach feels full when they drink a lot of water, but the difference you get in muscle fullness would usually offset it, and that's if you can even see it. And most of the time, I can't, but I do get that it's a feeling, and that's always something that's hard from a coach's perspective because you can never feel what your client is feeling other than what they tell you. And sometimes that can play with their eyes on how they feel, they think they look.
100%. Yes, you said it earlier. That comes down to just a lot of experience, a lot of communication, a lot of experience, and starting to connect those feelings with photos that they see after the fact. But really appreciate your insight here. Hope you had a fun trip to Chattanooga. Gosh, that's not that far from me. I wish I would have thought of it ahead of time to go down there and meet you there. But we'll have to connect later this year at some of the other big shows.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody. Again, appreciate your time and hope you're enjoying Contest Prep University. If you ever have any questions, obviously you can message us directly into the place where you're streaming these. You can always ask information about our D1 club, Contest Prep University D1 club, where we have some behind the scenes conversations with members there. And we will see you next time in Contest Prep University.